Why, George Spencer?
Why? Well, Jeff, this seemed to me to be possibly a poem that was a political poem. You're sort of combining politics, consumerism, and war and that kind of thing. Is that a misreading of this?
Well, there is the line about war, and you know, we are in 2 wars, and I think it's a mistake for poets to ignore the world around them. I also think it's a mistake to rely too heavily on that as a subject matter.
I agree.
But this poem is, I think it is a little more, when you start to ask 6 questions, which this poem basically is, then you're looking around there, well, which 6 worlds are you going to represent? So you start off, you get into the poem from the dream world, which is the first part of the line, you know. And then it references questions in the end as well, but this one's not, I don't think it's especially overt.
No, I don't think so either.
Referential.
I don't think so either. I mean, overt political poems get dated pretty quickly anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a problem.
But you know something else though, these poems, a lot of times they have anachronisms, like the forge, the sword. These things aren't so much a part of our lives, but they do give it, they are part of our poetic lives, because they're like the quest, they're part of the quest, which is an old-fashioned word too. And again, I love those old, the fairy queen type.
Queen Mab lives, right?
There you go.
So let's move on to the series of poems which all start Maid. And how about reading Maid in Gotham?
Well, George, these poems here, there's a series of them. It's a triple crown. There's 14 sonnets. There's 3 different groups of them. And I thought, well, one great idea would be if I just call them all Made in Somewhere. That means I don't have to think about the title. So it's one thing out of the way. And it's sort of a kickstart to get me going. So this one was called Made in Gotham. Poseidon's colossal tears fall into Ulysses' bier. In the midnight hour, I'll sing. In the midnight hour, David Shapiro's blood runs gold in his poems. His son found the lost sun's orange dust cover. I have never found what the attraction is, Magneto said. Pardon me for asking, but who do you think you are? Here comes Zen bones, Zen smoothbore action. How much I wish the truth would tell it like it is. Back it up, jackass. Make room for the non-believers. Olympus is crowned with a cathedral of cotton fog. I polish its organ with everything I've got, like an old puzzle laughing at shoes untied. I will cover you with wings of garnet whoosh until everyone is home free, utterly bozo.
When you read the poem, you punctuate it.
It's easier if you hear me than to read it yourself.
Now, are you, and the poem itself is without punctuation.
Yeah.
Do you read it different ways, different times?
Never.
Because you can get
I hear it exactly the way it's supposed to be every time.
The way it's supposed to be.
The way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And I could do it the same way every single time. I know how it's supposed to be, and that's why it's easier. But these poems actually, on the page, they're separated by a line and a half. And that's when I started the series, when I got a new computer, and the default, instead of single line, which these are printed out single line, it went to a line and a half, and it gave you this airy quality, a standalone quality. I studied with Bill Matthews also, and he said, but Jeff, when you write poems, it's kind of like you take that barbell up to here, and you go like this, and you put it back down. And you feel like every line, you've got to do that again. You can get it up to here and just go like this for a while. But I've always had this impulse to make every line stand alone.
This is why you're such a thin guy with the barbells going up and down all
But
the
within
time.
these poems now, it's true that every line could stand alone, but all the poems are talking to each other. It's a whole, like Jack Spicer talked about, these serial poems. So this is one large serial poem. So none of the lines stand alone, but yet there is no punctuation. There's not very much enjambment or any of that kind of stuff. Each line stops. Occasionally, a line will go with another line, and there are things to make them go with the other line, like you can say with or and.
Because you can read these with punctuation other than what you did.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Now, once again, this sort of asks something of the reader.
Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed here, I was just curious, Zem Bones, are you a John Barrowman fan?
Yes. And this is a reference to the other book.
To the Barrowman book? I mean, to the Barrowman book? To his
Dream Poems?
Yeah. Or just
Actually, there was a book called something like Zen Bones, Zen Moves, Zen Bones, or something. So it was an actual reference to that book, which may have been like Alan Watt even.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I like Berryman the dream poems, and he had that persona in there, and I feel like there's a definite persona in these.
You're
Let
going
me
to
read
punctuate
Made in
it.
Valhalla. Thank you,
You're
George.
going to punctuate
Now,
it.
Made in Valhalla, as you can see this one, this is how it's supposed to look on the page. Not
Oh
with
yeah,
the
give
writing.
me mine back because it has my
sorry,
notes. Thank
but
you.
it's got the double spacing.
Yep.
So that's another window into the poem. It gives a reader a better chance to really get in there. And Valhalla is a great place, you know, because that's the Norse god. So one of the things with this series of poems was that the gods would come in and talk, because what I wanted to do was take all the myths and make them into a legend. I want to make the myths into the legend of me. So I want to talk to these people.
So this is a meta legend, or a meta myth.
That I'm working on. So each of them usually has some different mythology in them. And
well, let me just interrupt you here, because having read through some of the sequence, it seems to me that we're not confronted with the problem you have when you're reading, you know, Pope, for example, which is laden. There are these other people that are laden with myths, and you have to spend a day looking them up and find out who they are.
Although
you don't have this problem here.
One of the great things about this for me was the amount of research that went into it, and
but that was to make it understandable.
Well, it was to lead me through it in a way, because where did this stuff come from? Because I was searching Google, what was Valhalla? Who was there? Who are these people? So if I'd get one on my mind, like Bernadette, I said, who's your favorite mythological character? And she said Astarte. So I went and read up on it, and then some of those lines would come through. So that's another way to write poems, and it's another way you want to evaluate it. It's how much information is in here, because we get information from different sources now. So if I can share with you who some mythological character is, it'll make this more interesting. So anyways, this one's called Made in Valhalla. Hacking through the mist, bare-fanged, addicted to turmoil, well-hung, facing down the freaky keister, with utopia on my shoulder, Atlas, your gestures straight from the tube, and the giddy tour guides gong amuck, wearing their heuristic blue wedges, all honor brought back from the black edge, and you could have stayed until dawn, the crown of Ishtar to be your hub, until the jackals overtook the stragglers. Stay now, your horn of mead full on. Stay, see your face in the moon's helmet. Stay here in the charburst chamber pit.
Let me ask you about Google and Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Have those had an effect on your writing? The accessibility of this stuff?
Absolutely. You know? Because a lot of times when you're trying to write a poem, you're sitting there and you just stare at the page, and it's like, okay, so I went to work today, I didn't really do that much exciting, and even after a while, you know, you've played that card, you've written about all the exciting stuff you did, but a lot of times you didn't do anything. If I did something exciting, I do want to put it in there, but I'm working it because I had this whole motif, like I want to use these guys, so then I want to learn at the same time, so now it's becoming more of a process, which you want it to be. I'm learning, I try to find the mythological people, and then I try to find out who they are, like Dido or somebody, and then the deeper you get into it, the more there's paintings about them, and so you can quote all these people and throw some French in there. It's a different way to get language to use.
Now, do you do any flarf?
Well, this is flarf in a sense.
It is to some extent,
this
but it's not
flarf,
raw
but it's more directed.
Yeah.
You know, they'll do something like take two words, maybe like honey moth, and go, you know, see what comes up when they do those two combos of words.
And anybody can do the first process, the first step of that process.
Yeah. And this is a little like that. The only, maybe, you know, like Jack Spicer again was saying, it's almost like I'm getting transmissions from Mars. I'm just writing what I hear. And so that, I think, is important. And the improvisational aspect of it, the jumped lyric, it just comes out, sprung lyric, when you just say something like that. Well, these are reflective of living in the East Village and having the radio on, like Ted Berrigan said, in a sense, and getting materials off the street, and that's the nature of collage. So they're very contemporary, and they're somewhat of a document, and the poems are as well. You know, no matter how much artifice is in them, they're still reflecting how somebody's feeling and acting. And then there's the techniques that you're working up, and the motifs as well. So like the collages have the stickers, they have rock and roll graffiti, they have this fake graffiti, which is a little bit like writing. They have antique paper, they have a base. They're often done on the back, like this rabbit's done on the back of a beautiful invitation to a show at David's Horner. And this one, you can see the big bunches of stickers that came right off of a galleries outside the gallery. And then there I am, my little self-portrait of the jester.
Do you have any sort of trajectory that you think you're on, and maybe you want to be at a certain place 5 years from now?
Well, it was like Ted
Or is this
Berrigan's
just what
poem.
comes along?
I thought by now I would be standing with my arm on the mantle, looking at my Tourneau and sipping some Chivas Regal at my home on Perry Street, dazzlingly slim.
And how much of this has happened?
Well, a little bit. Mitch Corber gave us a little.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Chivas Regal there.
Well, I think at this point, Jeff Wright, I want to thank you very much for coming and spending this time with us, and it's been very interesting talking with you on Poetry Thin Air about your poetry and, you know, your art and how all these things tie together.
Well,
so I hope you'll come back.
George. And I thank you for giving me your book too. I look forward to reading it pretty soon, and hope to see you again. Thank you, George Spencer and Mitch Corber, for having me here on the Radio Thin Air.
Except it's cable.
All the better.